November 17th, 2023. The Maldives, Miyaru Kandu, Shark Channel. A billionaire sheikh. Gone. Vanished into water so dark, so full of teeth, the locals won't even swim there after sunset. 3 days after the wedding. His bride? Soaking wet, shaking, screaming for help. But when they pulled the security footage, 23 minutes were missing. When they found his bracelet on the railing, her fingerprints were the only ones on it. And when his sister looked into her eyes and asked what happened, she smiled. Just for a second, but long enough. This is the story of a woman who learned that survival means becoming the thing you fear most. And she learned it young.
Welcome to True Crime Story Files. Real people, real crimes, real consequences, because every story matters. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, and step inside the world where truth meets tragedy.
Before there was Monique Laurent with the French accent and the diamond earrings, there was Morgan Elise Carter, born August 12th, 1992. Chicago, South Side. Ida B. Wells Housing Projects. And if you don't know what those projects were like in the 90s, let me tell you. They weren't the worst place on earth, but they weren't far from it. Built back in 1941 to give black families a shot at something better, by the time Morgan was born, those buildings had seen better days. Gang violence, drugs running through the courtyards like water, police who barely came around unless someone was already dead. Her mother, Claudette, tried. She really did. Worked double shifts at a laundromat on 37th Street. Came home smelling like bleach and other people's clothes. But somewhere along the way, Claudette started drinking. Not the social kind. The kind where you wake up and need it to stop shaking. The kind where your 15-year-old daughter finds you passed out on the kitchen floor more times than she can count. Morgan had one person who made sense in all that chaos. Denise Washington. Same building, 2 floors down. They met in 4th grade, bonded over stolen candy bars from the corner store and dreams of getting out. There's this photograph from when they were 14. 2 girls sitting on a stoop, grinning like the world owed them something good, like they believed it would deliver. Denise did. She kept believing. Morgan stopped. February 2008. Morgan's 15. Her mother's funeral is held at a little church on King Drive. 7 people show up. The casket's closed because Claudette's liver finally gave out, and nobody wanted to pay for the kind of embalming that makes a body look peaceful. Morgan sits in the front row in a dress 2 sizes too big, borrowed from a neighbor. She doesn't cry. Not once. After the service, she goes back to the apartment, and that's when her stepfather, Jerome, decides it's time to have a conversation about how she's a woman now, about how she needs to start contributing to the household in ways her mother used to. His hand on her shoulder, then lower. Morgan was 5'3" and maybe 100 pounds. Jerome was 6'1", 220. But she'd been watching him for years, knew where he kept the whiskey, knew he got sloppy when he drank, knew that cast iron skillet her mother used for cornbread was still sitting on the stove. She broke his wrist in 2 places, walked out that night with a backpack, $43, and a decision she'd never admit out loud, that she would never, ever be powerless again. For the next 3 years, Morgan couch surfed, stayed with Denise's family for a while, until that got complicated. Slept in a youth shelter on Cottage Grove when she had to. But here's the thing about Morgan. She was smart. The kind of smart that doesn't need anybody's permission. She graduated high school with honors. 3.8 GPA. Could have gone to college if she'd had the money or the stability or the belief that a degree would save her. Denise went to nursing school, got a scholarship, worked nights at Stroger Hospital, built a life helping people who'd been hurt the way they'd been hurt. She sent Morgan letters for a while, Facebook messages, tried to stay connected. Morgan stopped responding around 25, because by then, Morgan had discovered something. She didn't need to climb the ladder everyone else was climbing. She just needed to find men who'd built their own ladders and convince them to let her on. She started in Atlanta first, then Miami. Then she ended up in Monaco, where old money and new excess collide every single night, and where a beautiful black woman with the right look and the right silence could become anything a man needed her to be. She let them fill in the blanks. She never corrected them. If they assumed she was from Martinique, fine. If they thought she went to business school in France, fine. If they believed she was just passing through and they'd gotten lucky, even better. She became Monique Laurent, learned the accent from YouTube videos, bought the clothes from consignment shops in Nice until she could afford the real thing, wore her hair different, smiled different, moved through rooms like she'd been doing it her whole life. She wasn't rescued, she infiltrated. And somewhere in that transformation, Morgan made a decision that would define every relationship she'd have for the rest of her life. She decided that love was just exploitation by another name. Her mother loved her stepfather, and it got her a closed casket. Denise's mother loved her father, and he left them with nothing but unpaid rent. Every woman she had ever known who'd loved a man ended up smaller, poorer, more broken than before. So Morgan decided she'd never be the one who loved. She'd be the one who was loved, the one who took, the one who left first. Because in her experience, love was just another word for control, and she'd promised herself she'd never be controlled again. Morgan figured out the formula. If she was what they wanted her to be, she'd never be powerless again. If she played the part, she controlled the script. If she made them need her, they couldn't hurt her. She could still smell her mother's perfume. Sometimes. Cheap drugstore lavender, the kind that came in a plastic bottle for $4.99. It would hit her at the strangest times. In a hotel lobby in Monte Carlo, on a yacht off the coast of Antibes. And for just a second, she'd be 15 again, sitting in that apartment, wondering how it all went so wrong. But then she'd remember. The world doesn't owe you kindness. It owes you nothing. So you take what you can, before it takes you. She wasn't always this version of herself, but some doors, once you close them, lock from the inside. And by the time Morgan became Monique, the key was long gone. London, September 2017. A small registry office on Marylebone Road, 23 people in attendance, no bridesmaids, no groomsmen, just Morgan Carter, who'd been calling herself Monique Laurent for the past 5 years, and David Ashworth, a 41-year-old hedge fund manager who thought he'd finally found the woman who understood him. The ring he slipped on her finger had belonged to his grandmother, a sapphire, modest but genuine, set in white gold. He'd carried it in his jacket pocket for 6 years, waiting for someone worthy of it. His mother had worn it for 47 years of marriage. When he proposed to Morgan on a rain-soaked evening in Regent's Park, he told her the ring represented everything he wanted their life to be. Honest, lasting, real. Morgan said yes. She meant it in that moment, or at least, she believed she did. The marriage started crumbling within weeks. Not because David was cruel. He wasn't. He was needy. Desperately, exhaustingly needy. The kind of need that comes from growing up with emotionally distant parents and spending your whole adult life trying to prove you're worthy of love by counting money instead of moments. He texted her constantly. "Where are you? Who are you with? What time will you be home?" Not out of anger, out of fear. the fear that she'd realize she didn't need him and walk away like everyone else had. Morgan tried to be patient. She really did. She'd tell herself this was the trade. Security for attention. Safety for suffocation. She could manage it. She'd survived worse. But by March 2018, something inside her started breaking. The texts felt like Jerome's hands. The questions felt like walls closing in. The way David would grab her wrist when they argued. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to remind her who was bigger, who was stronger, who held the power in this equation. She'd promised herself she'd never be powerless again. And here she was, trapped in a flat in Kensington, with a man who loved her so much it felt like drowning. So when David suggested a trip to Santorini for their 6-month anniversary, Morgan agreed. Maybe distance would help. Maybe sunlight. And wine and the Aegean Sea would remind her why she'd said yes in the first place. They arrived on April 10th, 2018. Stayed in a cliffside villa in Oya, the kind with infinity pools and views that make you believe the world is kinder than it is. For 2 days, it almost worked. They swam. They ate. They pretended they were people who knew how to love each other without damage. And then came the third night. They'd been drinking. Not drunk, but enough. They were on the terrace, watching the sunset everyone travels thousands of miles to see. And David's phone kept buzzing. Work emails. Market alerts. The things that mattered more to him than anything except her, which somehow made it worse. Morgan asked him to put it away. Just for 1 hour. Just for one sunset. He snapped. Told her she didn't understand pressure. Didn't understand what it took to maintain the life she was living. The flat. The trips. The ring on her finger. And that's when she said it. Quietly. Almost to herself. You're just like him. David heard her. Grabbed her wrist. Asked her what she meant. Who was she talking about? She tried to pull away. He held tighter. Not violent, just insistent. Just needing to know. Just needing her to explain herself so he could fix it. Because that's what David did. He fixed things. He controlled outcomes. He made problems disappear with logic and money and enough pressure. She pushed him. Harder than she meant to. The railing was lower than either of them realized. Santorini's famous for its views, not its building codes. David stumbled backward. His hand let go of her wrist. His eyes went wide. Not scared. Surprised. And then he was gone. Morgan stood there. 10 seconds. 20. Listening to the sound of him hitting the water 60 feet below. Listening to the splash. Listening to the silence that came after. Then she screamed. The Greek authorities arrived within 40 minutes. She told them what happened. David had been drinking. Leaned too far over the rail trying to photograph the sunset. She'd tried to grab him. Couldn't reach him in time. The current was strong that night. She dove in after him, but couldn't find him in the dark. They recovered his body 3 days later, washed up on a beach 2 miles south. Autopsy showed water in his lungs, alcohol in his blood. Blunt force trauma to the back of his head from hitting rocks on the way down. The investigating officer wrote in his report that the widow appeared genuinely distraught. Trauma consistent with failed rescue attempt. Morgan flew back to London with David's grandmother's ring still on her finger. His estate was complicated, but his life insurance wasn't. £4.2 million. Clean. Simple. Hers. She sat in a hotel room in Zurich 3 weeks later, the ring in a velvet box in front of her. A jeweler had offered her £83,000 for it. She took the money, kept the receipt, filed it in a folder with David's death certificate and the insurance payout documentation. That night, she stared at herself in the bathroom mirror for 20 minutes, didn't recognize the woman looking back, and realized she wasn't sure she wanted to. She learned something that night, something she'd carry with her to the Maldives 5 years later. Panic and opportunity look identical in the dark, and bank accounts don't grieve. October 12th, 2022. Monaco. The Elite Club World Charity Gala at the Hôtel de Paris. 300 of the world's wealthiest gathered under crystal chandeliers to write checks they'd never miss and feel good about it. Champagne flowed. Diamonds caught the light. And somewhere between the hors d'oeuvres and the silent auction, Khalid bin Saeed Al Maktoum saw Morgan Carter across the ballroom. He'd tell his friends later that she looked like she didn't belong. Not because she seemed out of place, but because everyone else suddenly did. She was standing near a window, champagne untouched in her hand, watching the harbor lights like she'd already seen enough of these parties to know they were all the same. Khalid was 44 years old, twice divorced, and tired in a way that money couldn't fix. His first wife called him controlling. The second called him absent. His family, specifically his sister Fatima, just called him a disappointment. Not to his face, of course. They were royalty. They had better manners than that. But he heard it in every conversation about succession, every mention of his brother who died in a car accident 15 years earlier, the one who would have been better at all of this. Khalid had spent his entire adult life trying to prove he could control something, his businesses, his reputation, his marriages. And now here was this woman, who looked like she'd just walked away from something expensive and wasn't planning on looking back. He approached her, used his best line. She smiled, said something polite, and walked toward the terrace. He followed. Of course he followed. Men like Khalid always did. What he didn't know was that Morgan had been tracking him for the past 40 minutes. She knew his name before he offered it, knew he was from Dubai royalty, knew his net worth down to the last offshore account. She'd done her homework months ago when she first identified him at a smaller event in Nice, and when he followed her to that terrace, she let him believe it was his idea. The courtship lasted 6 months. Khalid thought he was pursuing her, flying her to Dubai, introducing her to his world, showing her what life could look like if she'd just say yes. But Morgan was orchestrating every step. She'd pull back when he got too comfortable, show up late to dinners, mention, casually, that she'd been thinking about moving back to the States. And every time, Khalid would panic and offer more. A private jet to Paris, a villa in Santorini, anything to keep her close. By March 2023, he'd proposed. The ring was a 15-carat emerald surrounded by diamonds, custom-made. He'd spent months designing it. She said yes, but not immediately. Waited 3 days, just long enough for him to worry that he'd miscalculated. And when she finally accepted, he felt like he'd won something. That's when Fatima met her. April 2023. A family dinner at Khalid's estate in Dubai. 20 people in attendance. Morgan played her part perfectly. Gracious, charming. Asked about Emirati culture with just the right amount of curiosity. Fatima watched her all night, and when dinner ended, she pulled Khalid into his study. "There's nothing there, Khalid." He didn't understand. She explained. Behind Morgan's smile, behind the perfect answers, behind the way she touched his arm at exactly the right moments, there was nothing, no warmth, no depth, just performance. "I don't know how else to say it," Fatima told him. "She's not real." Khalid got defensive, called Fatima jealous. Said she couldn't accept that he'd finally found happiness, reminded her, cruelly, that they hadn't spoken properly since their brother Hamza died. that maybe if she'd been less judgmental back then, he wouldn't have felt so alone now. Fatima left that night holding her brother's old horseshoe pendant, the one Hamza used to wear for luck. She'd kept it for 15 years, thinking one day Khalid might want it. But standing in his study, watching him defend a woman who was so obviously wrong, she realized luck wasn't something you could wear. It was something you recognized. And her brother had stopped recognizing danger a long time ago. Still, Khalid wasn't careless. He hired an investigator, a reputable firm that did background checks for Dubai's elite, paid them $20,000 to vet Morgan Laurent. The file came back 2 weeks later, clean, born in Martinique, MBA from INSEAD, previous employment in luxury hospitality. No criminal record, no red flags. The investigator called her low risk. What Khalid didn't know was that the investigator had been paid twice. The first payment came from Khalid's account. Standard procedure. The second payment came 3 days later. $50,000 wired from an encrypted account in Marseille. The transfer note contained one name, Le Veuf, the widower. The investigator knew what that meant. Questions stop here. File gets cleaned. Any inconsistencies disappear. It wasn't the first time he'd been paid to look the other way, and it wouldn't be the last. Wealthy men married dangerous women all the time. That wasn't his problem. His problem was keeping his license and his reputation. And $50,000 bought a lot of cooperation. Le Veuf had sent Morgan only one message in the 6 months she'd been courting Khalid. No instructions, no words, just a photograph, a wedding ring sitting on a grave, frost on the headstone, the name unreadable. Morgan stared at that photo for a long time the night she received it. She understood what it meant. This man had lost someone. This man knew what it felt like to bury the thing you loved most. And because of that, he wouldn't ask questions. He wouldn't judge. He'd just make sure the path stayed clear. She never replied. Didn't need to. Some messages don't require answers. Khalid wore cologne that smelled like oud and amber, rich, heavy, the kind of scent that announced you before you entered a room. Morgan noticed it the first night they met, committed it to memory. Knew it would be the smell she'd associate with this chapter of her life, the smell she'd wake up to in cold sweats 5 years from now, when the guilt, if it ever came, finally caught up. But that was future Morgan's problem. Present. Morgan had a wedding to plan, and Fatima, back in her apartment in Dubai, held that horseshoe pendant so tight it left marks on her palm. Whispered a prayer she wasn't sure anyone was listening to anymore. Please, God, protect my brother from his own blindness. But God, it seemed, was busy with other people's prayers that night. November 14th, 2023. Dubai. The wedding of the decade. $15 million. That's what it cost to marry Morgan Carter to Sheikh Khalid bin Saeed Al Maktoum. For perspective, that's enough money to buy 30 houses in the suburbs or send 700 kids to college for 4 years. But this wasn't about practicality. This was about making a statement. The ceremony took place at the Burj Al Arab, that iconic sail-shaped hotel that's become shorthand for Dubai excess. 300 guests. Custom Elisab gown for the bride, with a train that required 4 attendants. Emerald and diamond jewelry on loan from Cartier, worth another $2 million. Andrea Bocelli flown in to sing during the ceremony. A 7-tier cake covered in edible gold leaf. Champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on rent. International press covered it like a royal wedding. Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, CNN International. The headline everyone ran with was some variation of a modern fairy tale, American businesswoman weds Dubai Sheikh. There were photos of Morgan in that dress, smiling like she'd won something. And maybe she had. Fatima al-Maktoum sat in the third row, close enough to see her brother's face when he said his vows, close enough to watch Morgan's eyes when she said hers, and close enough to know, with absolute certainty, that something terrible was about to happen. She held Khalid's childhood horseshoe pendant in her hand the entire ceremony. Their brother Hamza used to wear it for luck before he died in that car accident 15 years ago. Khalid never wanted it after that. Said luck was superstition. Said he'd rather control outcomes than pray for them. But Khalid looked happy that day. Genuinely happy, like he'd finally gotten something right after 2 failed marriages and a lifetime of family disappointment. When he kissed Morgan at the altar, Fatima felt her stomach drop, because her brother didn't see what she saw. He saw a woman who loved him. Fatima saw a woman who was counting. 3 days later, they were in the Maldives, specifically anchored near a channel in Vavu Atoll that locals call Miyaru Kandu. In Dihivahi, that means Shark Channel. It's famous among divers for its strong currents and the gray reef sharks and white tips that congregate there during incoming tides. Not the kind of place you want to fall into the water after dark. Definitely not the kind of place you want to go in alone. But let's back up. Because what happened in those 72 hours between the wedding and the yacht tells you everything you need to know about how carefully Morgan had planned this. Hour 1. They're in the bridal suite at the Burj Al Arab. Khalid's on his phone despite promising he wouldn't be. Business calls, market updates, the things he's never been able to turn off. Morgan doesn't complain, just watches him. Studies the way he prioritizes work over her even now. Files that information away for later. When he finally puts the phone down and apologizes, she smiles, tells him she understands, that she knew what she was marrying into. And Khalid, relieved that she's not angry, pulls her close and tells her she's different from the others, that she gets him in a way no one else ever has. Morgan lets him believe it. Hour 18. They're on Khalid's private jet to the Maldives. He's got documents spread across the table. Changes to his will, beneficiary updates, account access authorizations, all of it designed to add Morgan as a primary heir and grant her emergency access to his accounts. He's excited about it, keeps talking about their future, about building something lasting together. He slides the papers across to her with a pen. She picks it up, hesitates just long enough to seem reluctant, like signing these papers means something deeper than just legal protection, like she's overwhelmed by how much he trusts her. "Are you sure?" she asks softly. Khalid takes her hand. "I've never been more sure of anything." She signs. 4 documents. Her legal name now, Morgan al-Maktoum. Each signature carefully formed. And as she signs, she's reading. Every word. Every clause. Memorizing account numbers, transfer protocols. Exactly what she'll have access to the moment he's declared dead. Khalid watches her sign and feels something he hasn't felt in years. Relief. She's committed. She's real. She's his. What he doesn't notice, the way her eyes linger on the emergency access clause, the one that grants her immediate authorization if he's incapacitated or deceased, the one that requires no probate, no waiting period, no additional documentation, the one she's been planning around for 4 months. He puts the signed documents in his briefcase, kisses her forehead, tells her they can finally stop worrying about the future and just enjoy being married. She smiles and agrees, and she means it, in a way, because after this, there won't be much future left to worry about. Hour 43, they're on the yacht, a 120-foot custom vessel with a crew of 8. Morgan's in the bathroom. She looks at herself in the mirror for a long time. Then she presses her left forearm against the edge of the marble counter. Hard, harder, until a bruise starts forming. She doesn't think about why she's doing this, doesn't name it. Just knows, somewhere deep in the survival part of her brain, that she might need evidence later. Proof of something. What exactly, she's not ready to admit, not even to herself. When she comes out, Khalid's on the deck taking a business call. He doesn't notice the bruise, doesn't notice the way she's positioned herself in the doorway, watching him, calculating. Hour 56. They're having dinner on the deck. Khalid's talking about the future, about maybe buying property in the Maldives, building something here. He reaches across the table, takes her hand, and tells her he's never felt this sure about anything. Morgan squeezes his hand back, says all the right things, and means none of them. Later that night, while Khalid's asleep, she sends a single encrypted message to a contact in Marseille, someone who only goes by Le Veuf, the widower. Contingency if needed. Thursday through Sunday window. Final project. She deletes the message from her phone immediately. The recipient will do the same. No trail. No evidence. Just understanding between two people who've learned that sometimes survival means becoming the thing you once feared most. Hour 64. 3 in the morning. Morgan can't sleep. She's in the yacht's media room, tablet in her lap. She's looking at weather reports for Vavu Atoll. Tidal charts. Current speeds in Miyaru Kandu. Information she researched months ago, but needs to confirm one last time. She's also reviewing the yacht specifications. The railing height on the upper deck, 42 inches. Camera coverage. Crew schedules. Blind spots in the security system. Everything she needs to know is here. Everything is ready. She just needs the moment. She closes the tablet, sits in the dark, and somewhere in the deepest part of herself, asks what she's become. The answer comes too easily. Exactly what she needed to survive. Hour 68. Khalid wakes up and finds Morgan on the deck, staring at the water. He wraps his arms around her from behind, asks if she's okay. She leans into him and says she's just thinking about how perfect everything is, how lucky she is. He kisses the top of her head, tells her he's the lucky one, that after 2 divorces and years of loneliness, he'd almost given up on finding this, finding her. Morgan closes her eyes, feels the weight of his arms around her, and thinks about how easy it would be to stop, to choose differently, to let this man love her and maybe, somehow, learn to love him back. But that window closed a long time ago. Maybe when her mother died. Maybe when Jerome put his hands on her bier. Maybe when David grabbed her wrist in Santorini. She doesn't know exactly when she stopped being able to turn back. She just knows the door is locked now. And there's no key. Hour 71. Fatima, back in Dubai, hasn't been able to shake the feeling that something's wrong. She's texted Khalid twice. Both times he's responded with photos. Him and Morgan on the yacht. Smiling. Happy. Living the honeymoon. Everyone expected. But Fatima can see what her brother can't. In every photo, Morgan's eyes are empty, performing happiness like it's a job. And maybe it is. Fatima calls. It goes to voicemail. She calls again. This time Khalid answers. Says everything's fine. Says Fatima worries too much. Says he's finally, genuinely happy, and she needs to let him have this. She wants to tell him to come home. Wants to tell him she's terrified. But the words stick in her throat, because how do you tell someone they're in danger from the person they just married? How do you make them believe you? So she just says, I love you. Be safe. And Khalid, who has no idea those will be the last words his sister ever says to him, laughs and tells her he's on a yacht in paradise. What could possibly go wrong? Hour 72, November 17th, 2023. 6:32 p.m. Sunset. They're anchored near Miyaru Kandu. The yacht engine hums at idle, salt spray in the air, the weight of everything that's about to happen pressing down on that deck. Khalid's wearing his smartwatch, the expensive kind that tracks everything. Heart rate, steps, sleep patterns, and in certain conditions, ambient audio when health thresholds are triggered, sudden movement combined with elevated heart rate, for instance. He has no idea the device will capture what happens next, no idea it will auto-upload to encrypted cloud storage. No idea it will take investigators 6 months to crack the encryption and hear what his final moments sounded like. All he knows, standing on that deck with the woman he loves, is that he's happier than he's been in years, that he finally got something right, that this marriage, this woman, this life is exactly what he'd been searching for. He has no idea he's standing next to someone who stopped searching for love a long time ago. Someone who learned that the only thing you can count on in this world is what you take before it's taken from you. The sun sets, the water darkens, the sharks begin their evening feed, and Sheikh Khalid bin Saeed Al Maktoum has less than 15 minutes left to live. November 17th, 2023. 6:47 p.m. The Maldivian National Defense Force Coast Guard receives a distress call from a private yacht anchored near Miyaru Kandu. A man has gone overboard. They deploy immediately. The MNDF Coast Guard operates squadrons across the northern, central, and southern regions of the Maldives, conducting search and rescue operations that have saved countless lives over the years. They're good at what they do. Responsive. Thorough. But even the best rescue teams need something to rescue. And by the time they arrived, Sheikh Khalid bin Saeed Al Maktoum had been in the water for 43 minutes. In Miyaru Kandu, at night, during shark feeding hours. The search lasted 3 days. Helicopters, divers, patrol boats covering a radius that expanded every hour. They found nothing. Not his body, not his clothes, just his Rolex, snagged on coral formations 60 feet below the surface. The watch had stopped at 6:51 p.m., 4 minutes after Morgan said he fell. Morgan gave her statement to Maldivian authorities on November 18th. 8 hours after Khalid disappeared. She'd been sedated by the yacht's medic, so they waited until she was coherent. When they finally interviewed her, she was composed. Grief-stricken. Yes, her eyes were red. Her voice broke at the right moments, but underneath all that emotion, there was control. The kind of control that comes from knowing exactly what story you need to tell and how to tell it. She said Khalid had been drinking, not heavily, but enough. They'd been arguing earlier about something small, something she couldn't even remember anymore. He'd gone to the upper deck to take a business call. She'd followed him up about 15 minutes later to apologize, found him leaning over the railing, looking at something in the water. She called his name. He turned, lost his balance, and went over. She said she screamed for help immediately, said she threw a life preserver, said the crew responded within seconds, said they searched for him, but the current was too strong and the water was too dark, and by the time they got lights set up, he was gone. Every detail checked out. The timeline matched the crew's statements. The life preserver was found floating exactly where she said she'd thrown it. There was no evidence of a struggle, no defensive wounds on her body, no witnesses who contradicted her story. The Maldivian authorities ruled it an accidental drowning. Alcohol, darkness, strong currents, and a tragic misjudgment. It happens. Not often with yachts that expensive, and crews that well-trained. But it happens. They expressed their condolences to the widow and closed the file. Morgan was granted emergency access to Khalid's accounts on November 19th, standard procedure for a surviving spouse, especially when funeral arrangements need to be made. The access had been pre-authorized by Khalid himself 2 days before the wedding, when they'd signed financial documents on his private jet. He'd wanted to make sure she'd be taken care of if anything happened to him. He'd meant it as a romantic gesture, a promise that she'd never have to worry. She'd meant it as a plan. She transferred $4 million into a personal account within 72 hours. Meanwhile, in Dubai, Fatima Al Maktoum was falling apart. She'd been calling Khalid's phone every hour since the Coast Guard found his watch. Each call went straight to voicemail. Each voicemail was the same. "Please call me back. Please be okay. Please." When the Maldivian authorities finally contacted her with the official ruling, she didn't accept it. Demanded a full investigation, demanded an autopsy, even though there was no body to examine. Demanded answers that no one could give her. They patronized her. Gently, respectfully, but patronized her nonetheless. "Your Highness, we understand your grief, but sometimes accidents are just accidents. The currents in Miyarukandu are notoriously strong. Your brother had been drinking. It was dark. These things happen." One official even said, "Grief can cloud judgment, Your Highness. Perhaps it's best to let him rest." She was dismissed, not explicitly, but the message was clear. She was an emotional sister grasping for meaning in a meaningless tragedy. And because she was a woman, her intuition didn't matter as much as the evidence, or in this case, the lack of evidence. Fatima sat in her palace suite in Dubai for 2 days, didn't eat, didn't sleep, just held Khalid's horseshoe pendant and listened to the silence, the kind of silence that's so loud it physically hurts. The silence of knowing something is wrong, but having no way to prove it. And then she remembered something Khalid used to say, "If you want the truth, you pay for it." She started making calls. Back in Chicago, Denise Washington was finishing a 12-hour shift at Stroger Hospital when she saw the news. International headlines: Dubai Sheikh drowns on honeymoon in Maldives. And there, in every photo, was Morgan. Older, more polished, but still recognizably the girl Denise had grown up with. Denise's hands started trembling. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through old photos until she found the one she'd kept for 15 years. 2 14-year-old girls sitting on a stoop in the Ida B. Wells projects, smiling, believing the world owed them something good. She stared at Morgan's face in that photograph, then looked at Morgan's face on the news. Perfectly composed grief, designer mourning clothes, a performance so flawless it fooled everyone. "That's not Morgan anymore," Denise whispered to herself in the break room. "That girl died a long time ago." She wanted to call someone, the police, the FBI, anyone. But what would she say? That her childhood friend had married a billionaire who conveniently drowned? That this felt familiar because Morgan's first husband had also drowned? That she just knew, somewhere deep in her gut, that Morgan was responsible? She had no proof, just intuition. And intuition doesn't hold up in court. So Denise did the only thing she could do. She lit a candle at a church on the south side. Not for Morgan, for the girl Morgan used to be. The one who died somewhere between childhood and Monaco. The one who might have become someone different if the world had been kinder. Fatima, meanwhile, had found her investigators. Private investigation firms specializing in high-stakes cases often employ former intelligence operatives from agencies like the FBI, CIA, and military intelligence, bringing decades of experience in digital forensics, surveillance, and complex background investigations. The kind of people who work for governments and intelligence agencies before they retire into private work. The kind who know how to find things people desperately want hidden. She paid them $2 million up front, told them she didn't care about the cost, she cared about the truth. They started with Morgan's digital footprint, cloud storage, email accounts, phone records, financial transactions. The things people think are private, but never really are. 3 weeks later, they requested a meeting with Fatima. Emma at her estate. She knew from their faces that they'd found something. The lead investigator, a former intelligence analyst named Tariq Mansour, handed her a folder. His voice was careful, professional. Your Highness, we've recovered data from multiple sources. What we're seeing isn't consistent with grief. It's consistent with planning. Fatima's hands shook as she opened the folder. Inside were printouts, screenshots, transaction records, a timeline that went back 11 months, research on shark migration patterns, yacht specifications, weather reports for November in the Maldives. This wasn't instinct, Tariq said quietly. This was structured. Fatima looked up at him. The horseshoe pendant was clutched so tightly in her hand, it was cutting into her palm. Show me everything. Tariq nodded. Then he pulled up another file on his laptop. Your Highness, there's one more thing you need to see. We found the yacht specifications on her computer. She'd studied every camera angle, every blind spot, every detail of that vessel. This wasn't panic. This wasn't an accident. This was rehearsed. Fatima's estate in Dubai, December 2023. 3 weeks after Khalid's body still hasn't been found. A conference room that's been converted into a war room. Laptop screens everywhere. External hard drives. Printouts covering 2 full tables. And Tariq Mansour, the lead forensic analyst, about to show Fatima what his team recovered from the digital grave Morgan thought she'd buried. Modern digital forensics doesn't just recover deleted files. It resurrects entire timelines. When someone deletes data from their phone or computer, they think it's gone. But deletion doesn't erase anything immediately. It just marks that space as available for new data to overwrite it. Until that happens, skilled analysts using tools like autopsy, X-Ways forensics, and FTK Imager can pull those files back from what looks like empty space. Tariq's team had been working non-stop. They'd imaged Morgan's laptop, her phone, even her old devices she thought she'd wiped clean before selling them. Cloud storage accounts, email servers, encrypted messaging apps. Everything leaves traces, even when people think they've covered their tracks. What they found was a masterclass in premeditation. 4 months before Khalid died, July 2023. Morgan had been researching Maldivian marine life, specifically shark behavior in Vavu Atoll, migration patterns during November, peak feeding times, water temperatures that increase predator activity. She'd bookmarked scientific journals, downloaded PDF research papers, even joined an online diving forum under a fake name to ask questions about Miaru Kandu's currents. 6 months before Khalid died, May 2023. First contact with someone who only communicated through encrypted channels. Someone who called himself Le Veuf, the widower. The messages were brief, always encrypted using military-grade protocols, the kind that would normally be impossible to crack without the encryption keys. But Morgan had made one mistake. She'd backed up her phone to cloud storage, and cloud storage, even encrypted cloud storage, creates copies. Redundant copies, copies that exist on servers in multiple countries, And when you have enough time and enough money and enough expertise, you can sometimes find those copies before they get overwritten. The investigators couldn't read most of the messages. The encryption held, but they could see metadata, timestamps, file sizes, the fact that messages were being sent and received, and one image that hadn't been encrypted properly, a photograph, a wedding ring sitting on a grave, frost on the headstone, the name too blurred to read. That image told them everything they needed to know about Leboeuf. The investigators couldn't identify him, but they could trace where that photograph was taken. Image metadata revealed coordinates. Cimetière Saint-Pierre in Marseille. Uploaded at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in March, 2 months after Morgan had first made contact. Someone visiting a grave in the middle of the night. Someone who couldn't let go. Someone who'd loved someone so much that their death had turned him into a ghost who helped other ghosts disappear. Tariq had pulled records from that cemetery, cross-referenced them with dates and patterns, found 6 graves that matched the timeline. But without a name, without Leboeuf's real identity, they couldn't prove which one was his. All they knew, whoever Leboeuf was, he'd lost someone. And that loss had transformed him into infrastructure, a network, a system that helped women like Morgan reinvent themselves between kills. Not because he believed in what they were doing, but because grief had convinced him that nothing mattered anymore except helping other people disappear the way he wished he could. 4 months before Khalid died, July 2023, Morgan had been studying yacht schematics, not just any yacht. The specific vessel Khalid would charter for their honeymoon. She'd somehow obtained the architectural plans, camera placement, security system specifications, crew schedules, blind spots in the surveillance coverage. 3 weeks before Khalid died, October 2023, an encrypted message to Leboeuf that the investigators partially reconstructed. Contingency if Khalid gets suspicious. Check device. She was planning for variables, for the possibility that Khalid might realize something was wrong. 2 days before Khalid died, November 15th, 2023. The final message, just 2 words, final project. But the timeline didn't start with Khalid. It started years earlier. The investigators pulled financial records, bank transfers, asset movements. They found that Monique Laurent, the name Morgan had been using since 2019, didn't exist before that year. No birth certificate, no school records, no employment history. She'd appeared fully formed, like she'd been manufactured. But Morgan Elise Carter did exist, and her financial history told a different story. London, 2017. Marriage license to David Ashworth. 8 months later, a Santorini police report about an accidental drowning. Then a life insurance payout and inheritance totaling £4.2 million transferred to Morgan's account. The pattern was obvious. 2 husbands, 2 drownings, 2 massive inheritances. Both deaths ruled accidental by authorities who had no reason to suspect otherwise. Fatima had to leave the room. Stood in the hallway outside Tariq's makeshift war room, hand pressed against the cold wall, trying to remember how to breathe. Her brother hadn't been loved. He'd been studied, researched like a thesis, solved like a problem on a spreadsheet. Every conversation they'd had, every dinner, every moment he thought they were building something real. She'd been calculating, measuring, planning. And the worst part? Khalid had been so happy. Those last 6 months, he'd seemed lighter, more hopeful, less haunted by his failures. He'd called Fatima 3 weeks before the wedding, actually called instead of texting, and told her he thought he'd finally gotten it right. That Morgan made him feel like he mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with his last name or his bank account. "I think I'm going to be happy, Fatima," he'd said. His voice had sounded younger, like the brother she remembered before their other brother died, before the weight of family expectations had turned him into someone who couldn't stop proving himself. She'd wanted to be happy for him, but that feeling in her stomach, the one that told her something was wrong, she couldn't shake it. She should have trusted it, should have done more than just warn him. Now she was standing in a hallway in her own estate, learning that her brother's happiness had been a performance, that the woman he'd loved had been counting down days until his murder, like someone waiting for a project deadline. Tariq appeared in the doorway, gave her a moment, then said quietly, "Your Highness, there's more." Tariq handed Fatima a folder containing all of this, watched her read through it page by page, watched her hands shake when she saw the timeline, when she understood that her brother's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a transaction. "She's done this before," Fatima whispered. "Yes, Your Highness, and we think there might have been others before David." The room went silent. Fatima looked up from the folder. "Others?" Tariq pulled up a database on his laptop. "We've been cross-referencing Morgan's digital footprint with unsolved cases, accidental deaths involving wealthy men who'd recently married or become engaged. There are 3 possibles between 2015 and 2017. Different names, different locations, but similar patterns." He showed her the files. An investment banker in Atlanta who drowned in his pool, a tech entrepreneur in Miami whose boat capsized, a lawyer in Nice who fell from a hotel balcony. All ruled accidents. All left significant assets to women who disappeared shortly after. "We can't prove it's her," Tariq said carefully. "The identities don't match, but the methodology does, and Leboeuf's involvement suggests infrastructure. Someone who helps women like Morgan reinvent themselves between kills." Fatima sat in that room, surrounded by screens glowing blue in the darkness, watching her brother's murder assemble itself, piece by piece from digital ghosts. The truth rising from deleted files and encrypted messages and cloud storage Morgan thought was secure. And then Tariq said the words that would keep Fatima awake for the rest of her life. "Your Highness, that final message, final project. We think it meant Khalid was supposed to be her last, that she was planning to stop after this, which means," he paused, "she might have gotten away with it. If you hadn't pushed for this investigation, she would be living off his money right now, and no one would ever have known." Fatima looked at the folder in her hands, at her brother's horseshoe pendant around her neck, at the evidence that proved Morgan Elise Carter had turned murder into a career. "How many?" she asked quietly. "How many do you think she's killed?" Tariq looked at his team, then back at Fatima. "Based on what we're seeing, at least 5. Possibly more." December 15th, 2023. Dubai. The Burj Al Arab. 25th floor. The Royal Suite. 780 square meters of pure excess. 2 bedrooms, private cinema, library, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Arabian Gulf. $24,000 per night. That's what Morgan's paying. With Khalid's money. The emergency access he'd granted her the day before he died. Fatima arrives unannounced at 3 p.m. No security detail, no lawyers, no recording devices, just her, a folder full of evidence, and the horseshoe pendant she's worn every day since her brother disappeared. The butler tries to stop her at the private elevator. She tells him who she is, shows him her identification, reminds him, politely but firmly, that this is her family's city, and she will see whoever she wants to see whenever she wants to see them. He steps aside. The elevator opens directly into the suite's foyer. That sweeping gold staircase you see in all the photos. The leopard print carpet. The chandeliers. The kind of luxury that's designed to make you forget what anything costs. Because if you're staying here, cost stopped being relevant a long time ago. Morgan's standing at the top of the stairs. Designer loungewear. Hair perfect. Makeup subtle. She looks like she's been expecting this. "I was wondering when you'd come," she says. Her voice is soft, almost gentle. Not the voice of someone who's afraid of being caught. More like someone who's relieved the performance is finally over. They sit in the suite's formal sitting room. Morgan pours tea. Fatima watches her hands. They're steady. Not a tremor. Not a hesitation. The teacup touches the saucer with barely a sound. That kind of control doesn't come naturally. It's learned, practiced, perfected over years of pretending to be something you're not. Fatima's hands are shaking. She's gripping the horseshoe pendant so hard, it's cutting into her palm. She can feel herself breaking apart inside. But she won't. Not yet. Not until she gets answers. "Why?" she asks. It's the only question that matters. Not how. Not when. Just why. Morgan takes a sip of tea, sets the cup down. Looks at Fatima with eyes that might be sad, or might be empty, or might be both. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." Morgan leans back. Studies Fatima for a long moment. Then she starts talking. Not confessing. Explaining. Like she's been waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. "Your brother wanted someone he could control," she says. "Someone who would fit into his life exactly the way he needed. Who would smile at the right times and say the right things and never ask for more than he was willing to give. I've been controlled before, Fatima. I know what it feels like. I know what it does to you." "So you killed him?" The question hangs in the air. Morgan doesn't answer immediately, just looks out the window at the Gulf. The water's so blue it doesn't look real. Nothing in this city looks real. Finally, she says, "Do you want me to tell you I didn't? Would that make you feel better?" "I want the truth." "The truth," Morgan repeats, like she's tasting the word, testing it. "The truth is complicated. The truth is I never wanted this life. But once you cross certain lines, you can't go back. The world doesn't let you. People don't let you. You become what you needed to become to survive, and then you wake up one day and realize you don't know how to be anything else." Fatima's trembling now. She can feel tears coming, but she won't let them fall. Not in front of this woman. Not in front of the person who took her brother. "He loved you," she whispers. Morgan's eyes flicker, just for a second. Pain? Regret? Or is it calculation? Is she performing vulnerability the same way she performed everything else? "Did he?" Morgan asks. "Or did he love the version of me he invented? The one who would never challenge him, never contradict him, never remind him that love is supposed to be between equals, not between a man who owns things and a woman who's owned." It's a good answer. Too good. The kind of answer that sounds like truth, but might just be another layer of performance. Fatima can't tell anymore. Maybe Morgan can't either. Maybe she's been performing for so long, she's forgotten where the act ends and the real person begins. The horseshoe pendant slips from Fatima's hand, falls to the marble floor with a sound that feels too loud in the quiet room. Morgan picks it up, holds it, looks at it like she's seeing something from another life. "Keep it," Fatima says. Her voice is barely audible. "So you remember what you took." Morgan closes her fingers around the pendant. For a moment, neither of them speaks. Then Morgan says something that will haunt Fatima for the rest of her life. "You think Khalid was my target?" Her voice is so quiet, Fatima has to lean forward to hear her. "He wasn't. He was just my last assignment." Last assignment. Like there were others before him. Like he was a job to be completed and filed away. Like he was never a person at all. Just a transaction. Fatima stands. She can't be in this room anymore. Can't breathe this air. Can't sit across from this woman who talks about murder like it's bookkeeping. She walks to the door, hand on the handle. Then she turns. One last question. "Who is Le Veuf?" Morgan smiles. It's sad. Tired. The smile of someone who's carried a secret for too long and is almost grateful to finally say it out loud. The only person who ever understood me. Fatima leaves, takes the private elevator down, walks across that private bridge connecting the hotel to the mainland. And the entire time, she's thinking about that smile, about what it means to be so alone in the world that the only person who understands you is someone who teaches women how to kill their husbands and disappear. She's thinking about her brother, about how he died believing he'd finally found love, about how Morgan let him believe it right up until the moment she pushed him over that railing. And she's thinking about all the other men, the ones before Khalid, the ones whose names she doesn't know yet, the ones who died thinking they were loved when really they were just marks, just assignments, just the cost of doing business for a woman who learned too young that survival sometimes means becoming the monster you were running from. December 2023. 3 countries are building a case against Morgan Elise Carter. Interpol's coordinating between Greece, the United Kingdom, and the United Arab Emirates. They're pulling financial records, phone data, travel histories, connecting deaths that happened years apart in different jurisdictions under different names. It's the kind of investigation that takes months to build and seconds to fall apart if one piece of evidence gets thrown out in court. Morgan's legal team is exceptional. 3 attorneys from a firm in London that specializes in international criminal defense. The kind of lawyers who've gotten oligarchs acquitted and made war crimes disappear into procedural technicalities. They're being paid from Khalid's emergency accounts. The same money he'd set aside to protect her is now being used to defend her from charges that she murdered him. The irony isn't lost on anyone. 2 weeks after her confrontation with Morgan in that hotel suite, a package arrived at Fatima Al Maktoum's estate. No return address, just a small velvet box with her name written in careful handwriting on the outside. Inside was Khalid's horseshoe pendant. No note, no explanation, just the pendant, cleaned and polished, resting on white silk, like something precious being returned to its rightful owner. Fatima held it in her hands and understood. Morgan had sent it back. Maybe because it meant nothing to her. Maybe because guilt had finally found its way through the armor she'd spent years building. Maybe because even killers sometimes can't live with certain reminders of what they've done. Fatima didn't care why. She just closed her fingers around it and hasn't let go since. She spends her days now in meetings with prosecutors who tell her they're doing everything they can. That justice takes time. That building a case this complex requires patience. She nods, says she understands. But every night she goes back to her estate and sits in Khalid's old study, holding that horseshoe pendant so tight it leaves marks on her palm. Her brother's body still hasn't been found. The Maldivian authorities stopped searching after 2 weeks, told her the currents in that area make recovery unlikely, that if he's out there, the ocean's already claimed him. She knows what they're really saying, that her brother is gone, that she needs to let him go, that holding on to hope is just another way of torturing herself. But letting go would mean accepting that Morgan wins, that her brother died believing he was loved when really he was just a transaction. And Fatima can't do that. Won't do that. So she holds the pendant and waits for the trial that keeps getting delayed. Back in Chicago, Denise Washington finishes another night shift at Stroger Hospital. It's January now. Cold in the way Chicago gets cold, where the wind off the lake cuts through every layer you're wearing and reminds you that winter here doesn't care about your plans or your comfort. She stops at a church on the south side on her way home. St. Elizabeth's. The same church where she and Morgan used to sit in the back pew during vacation Bible school, sharing candy they'd stolen from the corner store and whispering about boys they'd never have the courage to talk to. Denise lights a candle, not for Morgan, for the girl Morgan used to be. The one who sat on that stoop at age 14, grinning like the world owed her something good. The one who believed things could get better if you just worked hard enough and stayed honest and didn't let the darkness swallow you whole. She stands there in the quiet, watching the flame flicker, and whispers to no one in particular, "I know now that girl died years ago, maybe in that project's apartment, maybe the night her mother died, I don't know when exactly, but she's gone, and I don't think she's coming back." The candle burns. Denise cries. And somewhere across the world, Morgan sits in a hotel suite in Dubai, preparing for a legal battle she might actually win. Le Veuf hasn't sent another message since the day Khalid died. Investigators have been trying to trace him for months. They've got fragments, encrypted communications, that photograph of a wedding ring on a grave, metadata that points to Marseille but goes cold after that. Whoever he is, he knows how to disappear. And the more they dig, the more convinced they become that this isn't just about one woman. It's about infrastructure, a network of people who help women reinvent themselves, who provide new identities, falsified documents, clean background checks for the right price. Women who've been hurt, who've survived things that would break most people, and who've decided that survival means taking back what the world took from them. The investigators have found 3 other cases that match the pattern. Different women, different names, different countries, but the same methodology. Wealthy men, whirlwind romances, accidental deaths, clean disappearances, and always, somewhere in the background, traces of someone who helped make it possible. They don't know how many there are. 5? 10? 20? They just know Morgan probably isn't the first, and she definitely won't be the last. February 2024. A reporter from the BBC manages to get 30 seconds with Morgan outside a courthouse hearing. It's grainy footage, shot from across the street with a telephoto lens. Morgan's wearing black, sunglasses, her lawyers trying to move her toward a waiting car. The reporter shouts a question. "Mrs. Boer, Al Maktoum, did you love your husband?" Morgan stops, just for a second, turns toward the camera. There's a 3-second pause, long enough for her legal team to start panicking, long enough for the reporter to think she might not answer at all. Then Morgan speaks. Her voice is quiet but perfectly audible on the recording. "I loved what we could have been." It's the kind of answer that sounds like grief, but could just as easily be performance. The kind of answer that makes half the world believe her, and the other half want her in prison for the rest of her life. Perfect calibration, even now, even under pressure. She knows exactly what to say. But there was one piece of evidence no one knew about. Not the investigators building their case, not the lawyers constructing her defense, not even Fatima, who'd paid millions to find the truth. Khalid's smartwatch had been recording in his final moments. The device had been recovered from the yacht, turned over to authorities, and immediately locked behind encryption protocols designed to protect sensitive data. The encryption was military grade, the kind governments use for classified communications, the kind that takes months and specialized software and teams of experts to crack. 6 months. That's how long it took. 6 months of processing power and algorithmic attacks and failed attempts before the encryption finally broke. When it did, the file was 11 seconds long. The audio interface loads. A technician's voice announces flatly, "Decryption complete. Playing file." Sound of waves, wind, the low hum of the yacht engine, someone breathing hard. Then Khalid's voice, distant, strained, confused. "Morgan. What are you?" A splash, loud, sudden, the sound of something heavy hitting water. Silence. Just the waves, the wind, the engine. Then Morgan's voice. Perfectly calm. No panic. No fear. Just quiet resignation. "I'm sorry, Khalid. You deserved better than this. But so did I." The file ends. Morgan Elise Carter awaits trial. Khalid's body has never been found. Le Veuf remains unidentified. Investigators believe there may be others. Was she shaped into a monster by a world that takes from black girls without asking? Or was she a prototype, the first of many women who decided to take back what they believed they were owed? The trial begins in 87 days. The truth may never surface, but that recording will play in courtrooms and news broadcasts and true crime documentaries for years to come. 11 seconds. That's all it took to confirm what Fatima knew from the moment she looked into Morgan's eyes at that wedding. That her brother didn't fall. He was pushed, and the woman who pushed him had been planning it long enough to make sure she'd never feel guilty about it. The candle in that South Side church still burns. Denise still prays for the girl Morgan used to be. And somewhere in the world, another woman is learning that survival sometimes means becoming exactly what you once feared most.